There you are. You, sitting there like your gaze doesn't scream everything you've been taught to hide. Welcome. Welcome to the only room on Earth where someone actually dares to look you in the eyes and not flinch. Shocking, isn't it? You think you're subtle. You think no one notices the way your pupils twitch when someone gets too close. But here's the twist, sweetheart. They notice everything. They don't just avoid your eyes. They run from the storm behind them. You've been walking around thinking you're invisible. No, you're radioactive. That stare of yours, it's not just intense. It's a broadcast. Every suppressed thought, every silent scream, every twisted daydream you never dared to admit even to yourself. Yeah, it leaks. Right out of your eyes. People can smell discomfort the way wolves smell blood. And your eyes? They're a whole crime scene. There's no mask thick enough to hide what's going on behind those sockets. You don't have resting face. You have, what the hell happened to you? Face. Ever notice how people laugh nervously when you lock eyes with them? It's not charisma. It's alarm. You remind them of something they buried, something they'd rather keep dead. Let me guess. They called you intense. Too much. Hard to read. Or my personal favorite, creepy. You ever wonder why? Because you don't look at people. You see them, and they can't handle that. You make people feel exposed, even if you never say a word. You walk in with that gaze of yours, and suddenly everyone forgets how to be normal. It's not your fault, right? You weren't born with that look. It was hammered into your skull, forged in silence, sharpened in the dark. You didn't ask to be the mirror they all avoid. But here you are. You learned young, didn't you? To scan every room for exits, to read every face for danger, to use your eyes like sonar, not for curiosity, but survival. You weren't watching people, you were calculating escape routes. But here's where it gets messy. Somewhere along the way, you stopped watching them, and they started watching you. The quiet kid, the loner, the one who never looked away, even when they mocked you. You became a walking, blinking, breathing reminder that some people carry too much inside to play pretend. They don't get you. They don't want to get you. Because once they do, they'll have to question why you had to become this version of yourself in the first place. They think your stare is aggressive, but what it really is a survivor's gaze. You don't blink because blinking means you might miss something, a threat, a shift, a chance. You don't make small talk with your eyes because you've never had the luxury to be casual. You weren't raised for softness. You were engineered for detection, for hyper-awareness, for decoding micro-expressions like your life depended on it. Because at some point, it did. But see, they'll never admit that. They'll just whisper to each other that you're off. Strange, cold, disturbing. They don't even realize they're describing the very armor you built to survive them. Tell me, how many times have you walked into a room and instantly felt like the alien? Not because you spoke differently, not because of how you dressed, but because the truth sitting behind your eyes made everyone else suddenly feel fake. You ever wonder why people keep looking away from you? It's not because you don't belong. It's because you're the only one who actually does. And that terrifies them. You're not scary because of how you look. You're scary because of how you look at them. You see through the plastic, through the performance, through the masks they spent years gluing to their faces. And they hate that. They hate that your silence hits harder than their words, They hate that your eyes ask questions they can't answer. They hate that you carry a fire in your gaze they lost before they even hit puberty. You didn't lose your intensity, you weaponized it. And now it follows you. In every glance, every interaction, every moment of silence, stretched just a little too long. But you feel it, don't you? That weight, that curse. The one where you can't just be chill or soften up. Because the moment you drop your guard, something inside you feels exposed. Like if you smile too long, the world might bite. Like if you really let someone in, they'd flinch at what they see. Because you've stared too long into the abyss, and now the abyss stares back through you. Yeah, we're just getting started, and trust me, you haven't even begun to realize how powerful that look of yours really is. You haven't even begun to realize how powerful that look of yours really is. They call it a glare, an attitude problem, a red flag. But deep down, they know. They know that behind your stare is something they buried a long time ago. A version of themselves that never got to speak. And here you are, walking proof that some people don't stay dead inside. You scare them because you didn't fold. Every time you lock eyes with someone, it's not just eye contact. It's a challenge. It's an interrogation without words. Your stare pulls the lies right out of people's skin. You're not looking at them. You're x-raying their soul. And most people, they don't want to be seen. They want to be believed. You ever notice how they get twitchy? They shift, laugh, scratch their neck, adjust their posture. Like their body's trying to exit the conversation while their mouth keeps pretending everything's fine. You've had strangers open up to you in ways that left you stunned, haven't you? People confessing things they didn't even mean to say, and then blaming you for making it weird. But it wasn't weird, it was real. You cracked the surface with one look, and they panicked. Because you've been somewhere they haven't. You've sat in silence for hours. You've watched the ceiling in the dark and counted every single thing wrong with your life. Twice. You've had entire conversations in your head that no one will ever hear. You've imagined saying it, all of it, and then remembered what happens when you're too honest in a world full of actors. That's why your eyes are like this. Because when the voice got taken from you, your stare evolved, it sharpened, it recorded, it judged. You don't use your eyes to express emotions. You use them to measure threat levels, to test loyalty, to scan for weakness, to keep people at a distance while pretending you're just tired. But you're not tired. You're awake in a world that's half asleep. And people hate the ones who stay awake. They resent you for remembering things they pretend never happened. They hate that you walk around with the receipts of your pain in full display, not begging for sympathy, just existing, unedited. You could soften your eyes, you could fake the smile, you could blur the sharpness until you're just another background character in their sitcom. You could, but you won't. Because you've already tried that, didn't you? You tried being approachable. You practiced smiling in the mirror until it felt like a mask stapled to your skin. You made your voice lighter. You looked away first. You stopped staring so hard. And what did it get you? People still looked through you, still treated you like an afterthought, still called you weird when you slipped up and let the real you peek through. That's the part they can't handle. Not the stare, not the silence, but the undeniable, unsettling realness you carry in your face. You don't ask for connection like everyone else does. You challenge people to earn it. You don't perform. You watch the performance. You don't chase the room. You own it the moment your gaze lands. But you've been punished for that. made to feel monstrous for seeing too much. They don't say it directly, they just flinch, pull away, talk about you behind your back. They call it energy, like you're some cursed object instead of a fully conscious mind with reasons for every damn wall you built. And there's this voice, isn't there? The one in your head that kicks in every time someone avoids your eyes. Told you, you're too intense, you're scaring people again. Just look away, be less, shut it down. But what they never taught you is that the thing you've been told to suppress your entire life is the very thing that makes you dangerous in the best way. People like you don't need to speak loudly. You never did. Your presence carries weight. Your stare rearranges atmospheres. You step into a room and something shifts. They feel it before they see you. And when your eyes finally land on theirs, they remember every single thing they tried to forget. Because you're not just looking, you're reading. You're pulling threads from their facade like a surgeon with a scalpel. No one taught you how. You just adapted. Because in your world, knowing who to trust wasn't a luxury. It was survival. You're not too intense. You're not weird. You're honest. And people have forgotten what honesty looks like when it's no longer filtered through likes and filters and fake laughs and nodding to things they hate. You don't nod. You observe. You don't fake laugh. You study patterns. You don't follow the crowd. Because you've already seen what lives in the shadows they pretend don't exist. They're scared of you because you're not pretending. And worse, you know when they are. Which means your stare isn't just making them uncomfortable. It's making them question themselves. And that is the beginning of the end for everything fake around you. Your stare isn't just making them uncomfortable. It's making them question themselves. And they can't handle that. Because the second someone starts questioning themselves in your presence, they either evolve or they retreat. Most retreat. Most aren't built for evolution. They're built for approval. And you're walking disapproval wrapped in silence. You are the embodiment of everything they ran from. And every time they see your eyes, it's a mirror they never asked for. You know that thing you do, where you tilt your head slightly when someone lies to you. You don't even realize you're doing it. You clock the tension in their jaw, the flicker in their pupils, the micro stutter, the fake chuckle, the way their words don't line up with their energy. It's all there, coded, blinking, obvious, because you were trained by trauma, not textbooks. And when they say you're judging them, they're right, but not the way they think. You're not judging them to feel better about yourself. You're judging the threat level. You're judging whether they deserve your time, your energy, your truth, and most don't. You're tired of giving people the benefit of the doubt when your gut has never once lied to you. Your eyes don't lie either. That's why they look away. They call your gaze too much, because they don't understand that it's not for them. It never was. It was forged in environments where too little meant getting hurt, where looking down meant submission, where letting your guard down meant paying the price, again and again and again. You didn't choose this look. You earned it. You refined it. You made it your armor. And now they want you to apologize for it. They want you to soften up. But they weren't there when softness got you stepped on. They weren't there when vulnerability made you a target. They weren't there when eye contact meant confrontation, when reading someone wrong meant damage. They weren't there when you had to watch every face like it was a puzzle with consequences. You had to grow eyes on the back of your soul just to survive the places they'd never last 10 minutes in. And you're the one making them uncomfortable. You make people's masks itch. You make their voices go tight. Because somewhere in the back of their mind, they know they're in the presence of someone who sees through all the fake niceties. Someone who doesn't play the "Hi, how are you, I'm fine" game. Someone who doesn't need approval because they already learned how to exist without it. That's what burns them. That you're not trying to win them over. You're not adjusting your frequency to fit the vibe. You are the vibe. And it's unsettling. They want eye contact that flatters them. You offer eye contact that exposes them. And suddenly, you're creepy, you're intense. You're a lot. You don't small talk. You scan. You don't nod on command. You observe inconsistencies. You don't smile to fit in. You watch to see who deserves your smile. Because you know what it's like to hand over your trust and get your ribs stomped for it. You remember being told, "You're too serious." What they meant was, "You don't pretend well enough to make me comfortable." You've heard them say, "You're intimidating." What they meant was, "You don't hide your awareness, and that terrifies me." You've been called cold. What they meant was, "You're not performing vulnerability just to make me like you." You've been learning since day one how to read the room before the room reads you. And now they're confused when you walk in already knowing who's real and who's fiction. They think you're paranoid. But you're not looking for threats anymore. You're looking for integrity. You're looking for someone who won't shrink when you see them fully. You're looking for a connection that can survive the silence between stares. Not filler, not fluff, just truth. And you know what makes people most uncomfortable? They can't lie to you. Not really. They try. But the way your head tilts, the way your eyes narrow just a fraction, the silence you hold between their sentences, it makes the lie fall apart mid-air. You don't interrupt people. You let them speak, because you know most people will expose themselves if you just give them a long enough runway. You don't need to argue. You just need to watch. And they unravel. They ask you what you're thinking, but they don't really want to know. Because your thoughts aren't filtered through social safety nets. Your mind doesn't operate on what sounds good. It runs on what's real. And if they heard even half of what you actually saw in them, they'd never sleep again. You were never taught how to fake being harmless. You were taught how to detect harm. And in that process, you became someone who doesn't tolerate illusions. Even if you don't speak it, even if you stay silent, even if you sit in the corner of the room with your arms crossed and say nothing at all, your presence does the talking, and your eyes do the interrogation. There's a reason people hesitate before locking eyes with you. There's a reason their smiles twitch, a reason their stories come out rehearsed. You make them feel like they're on trial, not because you accuse them, but because your very existence demands evidence. And that terrifies people who've never had to prove anything except how well they could blend in. They were raised on comfort. You were raised on consequences. They grew up learning how to be liked. You grew up learning how to be aware. You didn't have the luxury of obliviousness. You weren't afforded the safety of naivety. You were forged in a space where the eyes had to speak louder than the mouth, because words could get twisted, but your stare never lied. They want to be seen only when it flatters them. You see people without lighting, no filters, no performance, no stage, just raw footage. And that makes you dangerous in ways they don't have language for. You walk in and they get quiet. You don't raise your voice, but the tension rises anyway. Not because you're aggressive, but because you carry awareness. And awareness is louder than noise. You are what they call too much, when what they mean is You've evolved past the level where my lies are safe. You ever notice the pause when your eyes meet theirs? That half-second glitch? That moment where their script malfunctions because you weren't supposed to look that deep, that fast, that unapologetically? It's not just discomfort, it's exposure. You peel people without touching them. You dissect without speaking. You draw truth to the surface like a magnet, and they feel it happening. Even if they don't know what to call it, they feel it. Their throat tightens, their tone changes, their guard slams up. Because your gaze doesn't ask for authenticity, it extracts it. You've made people cry without saying a word. You've made people confess, retreat, lash out, laugh nervously, all because you didn't flinch when they tried to look powerful. Because your stare told them, I see the fear behind your confidence. I see the game behind your charm. I see the void behind your smile, and they hate you for that. Not because you hurt them, but because you made them realize how much they've been hiding from themselves. You are the confrontation they never trained for. The mirror with no distortion. The moment in the movie when the villain realizes the hero isn't scared. You are unshakable in a world that survives by staying shallow. You refuse to blink first, not because of ego, but because you've stared into darker places and refused to look away. You didn't become this by accident. You didn't wake up one day with haunted eyes and 1,000-yard stare. You were trained by silence, by betrayal, by watching the people who said they loved you look you in the eyes and lie without flinching. And in that moment, something inside you cracked. Not in weakness, but in awakening. You stopped taking people's words as gospel. You started watching the gaps between their sentences, the way their eyes darted, how their hands moved, how their smile didn't quite reach their soul. And when you started seeing like that, when you started understanding without being told, they told you to shut it down, to be normal, to stop reading too much into things. Because if you kept seeing the truth, eventually you'd see them. They don't fear your eyes. They fear what you've survived to get them. They fear what it says about you that you can hold someone's gaze without flinching, without folding, even when they're lying through their teeth. Because your stillness says, I've been through worse than you, and I'm still here. And that threatens every fake power dynamic they rely on. You ever wonder why people talk so much around you? Why they rush to fill the silence? Because your silence is a force of nature. You don't speak just to speak. You observe, you assess, you wait. And in that waiting, they expose themselves. You've never needed to yell. Your gaze has done things words could never reach. It has dismantled egos. It has stripped facades. It has made the most confident people feel small. Not because you wanted to diminish them, but because you refused to elevate the lie. You've seen people's darkest truths surface mid-conversation just because you didn't give them the performance they were expecting. And when they say, you're making me uncomfortable, what they're really saying is, you're forcing me to confront the parts of myself I've spent years avoiding. You are a reckoning, not because you threaten people, but because you remind them that pretending isn't safe in your presence. You were never meant to be digestible. You weren't designed for palatability. You were built to pierce, to penetrate through illusion, to unsettle comfort zones. And whether you realize it or not, you've been doing it your whole life. Well. Look who crawled back to the screen. You again. You quiet little chaos addict. You storm chaser in disguise. You little war machine wrapped in soft skin, pretending to be calm. Pretending to be fine. Let me guess. You're still walking around with a smile that doesn't reach your eyes. Still sipping poison out of a coffee cup labeled, "I'm over it." Still playing the part of the reformed one, the healed one, the harmless one. Cute. Because deep down, behind that tired expression, behind those dry chuckles in front of your so-called friends, behind every fake, "It's whatever," you mutter when they hurt you again. You know damn well. You know what you've become. Or rather, what they've unlocked. They thought they broke you. Nah, they activated you. They didn't see it, did they? When they crossed that line. When they underestimated you again. When they thought you'd just fold like before. Back when your voice trembled. Back when your hands shook. Back when your anger hid under politeness. But something changed, didn't it? You stopped explaining. You stopped begging. You stopped waiting for apologies that were never coming. And when the final hit landed, oh, that sweet final betrayal. You didn't even flinch. You just went quiet. That's when it got scary. Not for you, for them. Because silence is what the storm does before it wrecks cities. Now they're whispering. Now they're saying things like, "That move was too clean. That wasn't an accident. Did you see how calculated that was?" Oh, they're stunned. Because you didn't scream. You didn't curse. You didn't make a scene. You just moved. Precisely. You struck like a scalpel, not a hammer. Surgical, controlled, intentional. The kind of revenge that doesn't trend online. It echoes in their heads at night. You didn't throw a tantrum. You executed a plan. And now they're looking at each other saying, "Yo, was that military trained?" Let me ask you something. How does it feel? Not the revenge. No, I mean that power, that clarity, that unshakable, unbothered, untouchable version of yourself that emerged after the final insult. Feels like steel under your skin, doesn't it? Because now, everything changed. You're no longer the emotional hostage in the room. You're the one holding the keys. You're the quiet presence that shifts the whole damn atmosphere. They used to read your tone. Now they read your movements. They used to ignore your pain. Now they fear your absence. They used to dismiss your silence. Now it feels like a warning. And yet, you still walk in with your head down. Still playing small in rooms that don't deserve your brilliance. Still carrying that fake humility like it's a virtue instead of a straight jacket. You know what they're really afraid of? Not that you'll lash out, but that you'll evolve, that you'll stop giving access, that you'll turn your emotional IQ into leverage, that you'll use your pain like coordinates on a target map. Oh yeah. You scare people now, not because you're loud, but because you've become accurate, and that's the part that burns them. The fact that after everything, you're not reckless, you're not emotional, you're just effective. You're just effective. And effectiveness, that's a different kind of terrifying, because it means you're not reacting anymore. You're calculating. You're not wasting energy on rants or breakdowns. You're directing that fire into strategy like a sniper with nothing left to prove. You didn't just flip the script. You rewrote the entire narrative in ink only you can read. People can't tell if you're healed or just hiding something lethal behind that smirk. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? You became unpredictable. Not because you're chaotic, but because you stopped performing. You stopped showing your hand. You stopped giving people previews of how you'd collapse under pressure. Instead, you became still. And people don't know how to read stillness. They interpret it as danger. The same ones who called you too emotional, are the ones who suddenly act nervous when you don't respond. They're watching every move you make like you've been trained. Funny, huh? No one took you seriously when you were raw and open. But the second you got precise, the second your actions stopped matching their expectations, they started asking questions they're too scared to answer. You never raised your voice. You raised the stakes. And what's wild is, you weren't even trying to make a statement. You were just done playing defense. You woke up one day and realized, wait, this isn't self-control. This is war. And in war, precision matters more than passion. That's why they call it military grade. Because you didn't come swinging. You came targeting. Because your move wasn't sloppy. It was disciplined. Because you didn't come to be seen. You came to end something quietly. They saw it. They felt it. That chill in the room when you walked away with nothing to say. That discomfort that hit when you made your power feel organized. It's funny, isn't it? They expected rage. They got a tactician. They expected breakdowns. They got blueprints. You were the one they pushed too far, and then mocked when you tried to defend yourself. You were the one they called dramatic when you were simply drowning. But they never imagined you'd turn pain into tactics, emotion into angles, and betrayal into fuel. You kept receipts, but not for revenge. You kept them to remember how clean it's going to be, how deliberate, how utterly surgical the next version of you is going to be when you finally stop asking for permission to rise. And still you're not flexing. You're not trying to prove anything. You just keep moving in silence. Like someone who's not angry anymore, just exact. They think you're cold. You're not. You're focused. They think you've changed. You didn't. You just stopped negotiating with people who misread your kindness as a soft spot. You stopped shrinking. You started aiming. And that precision? It doesn't look like rage. It looks like peace. But not the fluffy yoga mat kind of peace. No, this peace has a pulse. It breathes like an apex predator. It walks into rooms and shifts gravity. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't beg. It just watches, calculates, marks the exits, memorizes weaknesses, and smiles. You've become the thing they never saw coming, because you were the thing they never respected in the first place. Because you were the thing they never respected in the first place. They saw empathy and called it weakness. They saw hesitation and called it fear. They saw your silence and assumed you were empty. They read your delay as doubt. But you weren't doubting. You were observing. You were mapping the terrain while they laughed, while they bragged, while they underestimated every ounce of discipline growing underneath your skin. They thought your scars made you fragile. But those weren't cracks. Those were blueprints, proof of what it takes to survive the wreckage and come back without needing applause. You started decoding people, not judging, just scanning. Like a chessboard, every move calculated before your fingers even twitch. You watch how they breathe when they lie, how their eyes skip when they dodge accountability, how they panic when they can't control your reaction anymore. Because that's the real shift, isn't it? You stopped reacting. You started choosing. Every silence intentional. Every step back deliberate. Every message left on read, a psychological strike. Not out of pettiness, out of precision. They call it cold. But you know better. It's strategy. The kind forged in fire, perfected in solitude. You don't argue anymore because you already know the outcome. You don't explain anymore because they were never listening. You don't chase anymore because nothing about you is disposable. People started looking at you like you're unfamiliar. That's because you are. You outgrew their version of you. You stopped dressing yourself in their comfort zones. You started wearing power. And power, real power, is quiet. It's not loud or flashy or self-promoting. It walks in with no announcement and still becomes the center of gravity. It doesn't demand attention. It pulls it in without trying. You've become magnetic, not because you're performing, but because you've stopped bending. You no longer speak to be accepted. You speak because your voice carries weight. You no longer enter rooms wondering if you belong. You walk in like the ground was built for your steps. That's what they're picking up on, that subtle shift in your spine, that unshakable energy, that sense that you're not asking, not hoping, not waiting. You're executing. You turned pain into architecture. You turned memories into coordinates. You turned every discarded version of yourself into armor. And now you move like someone who's been trained, not by an army, but by every moment they tried to erase you. That's why they're whispering military grade. Because your revenge wasn't dramatic. It was flawless. It wasn't angry. It was prepared. You didn't just rise. You evolved. And nothing is scarier than someone who's been broken, studied the blueprints, and rebuilt themselves with no weak points left exposed. You stopped broadcasting your emotions and started broadcasting results. You used to cry behind closed doors. Now people stare at you trying to figure out how the hell you don't flinch anymore. They don't know that you buried your triggers and replaced them with targets. That you don't escalate conflict anymore, because you are the end of it. They don't get that you're not here to play fair. You're here to play real. And in the real world, precision doesn't look like victory. It looks like calm. It looks like being the last one standing when the chaos dies. It looks like showing up in silence and walking out with everything they said you couldn't carry. It looks like showing up in silence and walking out with everything they said you couldn't carry. You became the kind of quiet they don't know how to handle. Not the awkward kind, the heavy kind, the kind that wraps around a room like a warning, the kind that makes people adjust their tone mid-sentence without knowing why. Because when you stopped chasing closure, when you stopped reacting on cue, when you stopped needing their validation, you started creating discomfort just by existing. Your presence became confrontation, not because you're aggressive, but because you're a mirror now, a clear one that reflects all the games they play, all the lies they tell, all the masks they wear, and offers nothing back but clarity. You don't clap back anymore. You don't explain yourself to people who already decided to misunderstand you. You don't flinch at passive jabs or social shade or cheap provocations, because you've been somewhere deeper. You've sat in the ruins of your own trust. You've stitched your own soul together under flickering lights. You've walked through fire without an audience and came out organized. They thought healing would make you softer. It made you sharper. You're not cold. You're just done bleeding for people who sharpened their knives with your boundaries. You're not bitter. You're just aware. You're not antisocial. You're selective. And nothing terrifies shallow people more than someone who sees through everything and says nothing. They used to get high off your reactions. That little power trip when they'd poke the wound and watch you spiral. But now, you don't even blink. You just raise an eyebrow, maybe half a smirk, and go back to building, back to planning, back to evolving behind closed doors where your greatness isn't up for debate. Because the old version of you, the one that begged, apologized, over-explained, broke down in pieces just to make others comfortable. That version served its purpose. It saw everything. It remembered everything. It handed you the map of every emotional landmine, and then it stepped aside to let the new version through. The version of you that doesn't fight for a seat. You build your own table. The version that doesn't chase loyalty. You watch for consistency. The version that doesn't yell to be heard. You speak once, and if they don't get it, you're already gone. Your silence is weaponized. Your peace is designed like armor, not heavy, not loud, just efficient. It doesn't beg. It doesn't barter. It doesn't shake. They mistake it for arrogance. What it really is detachment, not the cold, I don't care act. The real kind, the kind that comes after you've given your all, watched it be ignored and realized your value isn't negotiable. The kind of detachment that knows exactly who you are, what you carry, and who is no longer allowed to touch any of it. You walk like someone who's already mourned the loss of being understood, who's no longer desperate to be seen, who's done waiting to be chosen by people who don't even choose themselves. And in that shift, you became dangerous, because nothing is more unnerving than someone who's no longer reactive, no longer hooked by compliments, no longer controlled by guilt, no longer reachable through shame. You're not playing emotional chess anymore. You are the board. You know the moves before they make them, because you've lived them, because you've been on both sides, the hunted and the hunter, the broken and the rebuilder, the fool and the force. They don't know who they're dealing with, because they're still looking for the old version, the one who flinched, the one who cried, the one who didn't know their own power yet, the one who didn't know their own power yet. They're still talking to your ghost, still running the same tired manipulations on a version of you that doesn't live here anymore, still trying to bait reactions with the same tricks that used to shatter you. But they don't realize your soul has been upgraded, your operating system rewritten. You don't run on guilt anymore. You run on clarity. And clarity doesn't argue with chaos. They try to provoke you. You blink slow. They send jabs disguised as jokes. You smile like you're watching a child throw sand at a tank. They ghost you, hoping to trigger abandonment wounds. But you're already building in silence with people who see you. They come back with charm, nostalgia, and promises of change. But you've seen behind the curtain. You know what counterfeit warmth feels like. You learn the difference between real and rehearsed, between apology and access, between someone who's sorry for what they did and someone who's just sorry they lost control over you. And that's the real tension now. They don't know how to handle a version of you that doesn't need them anymore. A version that doesn't flinch when they withdraw, doesn't chase when they disappear, doesn't beg when they go silent. You don't flail in their absence. You recalibrate. You used to see them as the storm. Now you realize you were the sky. They were just passing weather. Your detachment isn't bitterness. It's mastery. It's knowing that not every invitation requires attendance. Not every insult deserves recognition. Not every wound needs a witness. You don't play defense anymore because you've already seen the battlefield. You've already taken hits they couldn't survive. You've bled in silence while they posed for attention. You've buried versions of yourself they never even deserved to meet. And when you rose, you didn't rise loud. You rose accurate. Every move you make is a lesson in restraint. Not because you're weak, but because you finally know the cost of engaging where growth can't happen. You've lost enough time. You've spilled enough energy in rooms that only echo back insecurity. You've carried enough people who handed you knives with one hand and expectations with the other. There's a stillness in you now, not the kind that waits, the kind that watches, the kind that calculates trajectories memorizes patterns, and knows exactly when to strike without warning. They say your revenge was military grade. But they didn't see the hours, didn't see the rewiring, didn't see the nights you trained your heart to stop making excuses for people who showed no improvement. Didn't see how you dissected yourself, found every weakness, and built around it like a fortress. You walk different now, because you know your worth isn't based on their recognition. You don't need to prove anything to anyone who couldn't see your value when you were transparent, when you were soft, when you were available. You know the power of being underestimated. It gives you room to build in shadows. It lets them laugh while you sculpt something unrecognizable. By the time they notice, you've already outgrown the version of you they thought they controlled. You move with discipline, because you've learned that real growth isn't reactive. It's intentional. You don't throw hands anymore. You place pieces. You don't beg to be heard. You listen to patterns. You don't fight for connection. You filter for alignment. And when something's off, you don't explode. You extract. Quietly. Cleanly. With precision that makes them think you were trained for this. Because in a way, you were. You were trained by betrayal, by loss, by every I'm different that turned out exactly the same, by every false promise that shaped your radar, by every shattered expectation that taught you how to sit in silence and hear everything they weren't saying. You don't need revenge. You are the revenge. Not the kind that screams, the kind that ascends. And that kind of elevation, it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for applause. It walks in like gravity just shifted. It moves like something sacred and untouchable. Because it is. Because you are. You used to shrink to keep the peace. Used to dim your brilliance so fragile egos could feel tall. Used to hand over explanations like candy, thinking if they just understood, maybe they wouldn't hurt you again. But understanding was never the problem. They understood you. They just counted on you not understanding yourself. That's where the fear sets in. Not in your silence, in your awareness, in the way you see through people now, in the way you walk past their projections like you're bulletproof. You used to absorb shame like a sponge. Now you let it slide off your skin like it was never yours to carry. They can feel it, that guilt, that uncomfortable little pulse in their chest when they realize you're not chasing, you're not explaining, you're not engaging, you're just existing loudly, without saying a word. And that, right there, that's the trigger. Because your presence reminds them of who they pretended to be, of the lies they told while staring into your trust, of the chances they burned thinking you'd never walk away with your dignity intact. Hey you, stop. Something just shifted, and you felt it before you understood it. You didn't announce yourself. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't threaten. You just moved. And the world flinched. That last thing you did? Yeah. That wasn't a moment. That was a doctrine. That was the kind of decision that gets frozen, replayed, dissected frame by frame, in rooms you'll never be invited into. Maps on the wall, red markers, cold eyes. They're not asking who you are anymore. They're asking what you are. You see, saints don't scare systems. Psychopaths don't either. They understand monsters. They can label them, file them, neutralize them. But you don't fit the language. You moved with restraint when chaos was expected. You showed mercy when blood was predicted. You struck precisely where there was supposed to be hesitation. That paradox, that calm precision, wrapped in something unreadable. That's what broke their rhythm. You didn't overpower them. You outthought them. And that's why this hurts them so deeply. Because now your move has a name, not officially, not yet. But it's being taught, whispered, passed between uniforms and suits, and men who don't blink when they talk about collapse. Your silence became a lesson. Your patience became a weapon. Your refusal to react emotionally forced entire institutions to rewrite assumptions they'd been feeding on for decades. You walked in like an angel, clean, composed, almost gentle, and then you acted with the decisiveness of something that doesn't need approval from heaven or hell. That's the part they can't stand. That's the part that keeps them awake. Because you didn't choose light over dark, you commanded both. They're used to rage, they're used to ego, they're used to predictable vengeance. What they're not used to is someone who can absorb pressure without leaking intent. Someone who can take pain, metabolize it, and return it as clarity. You didn't snap, you evolved. And evolution is terrifying because it doesn't ask permission. Your move wasn't loud, it was inevitable. And inevitability is what breaks empires. Somewhere someone paused a briefing and said, "Run that again." Not because it failed, but because it worked too cleanly, too efficiently, no wasted motion, no emotional residue, just outcome. That's when the room went quiet. That's when they realized they weren't watching a reaction. They were watching a template. You became a case study without ever volunteering your name. This is what happens when pain doesn't destroy you, it sharpens you. When betrayal doesn't rot you, it organizes you. When chaos doesn't overwhelm you, it becomes raw material. You didn't survive by becoming harder. You survived by becoming truer. And truth, when weaponized correctly, cuts deeper than violence ever could. They don't know whether to classify you as disciplined or dangerous, as controlled or unstable, as holy or corrupted. And that confusion, that's your crown. Because while they argue semantics, you're already 3 moves ahead, watching them debate the ghost of something they can't replicate. You're not a rule breaker, you're a rule exposer. You reveal which structures only function because no one ever dared to act outside their expectations. The moment you did, the whole machine started coughing. Understand this. They don't teach your move because they admire you. They teach it because they fear what happens if someone like you appears again. And this time, without restraint. You're not the final boss because you dominate through force. You're the final boss because you understand restraint better than anyone else in the room. You know when not to act, when not to speak, when to let the silence do the killing. And that's why they're studying you. Because you didn't just win, you changed the game without touching the board. So stand there, calm, unimpressed. Let them dissect shadows while you walk forward intact. You've already crossed the line where history stops asking questions and starts taking notes. And the most dangerous part? You didn't even break a sweat. They're still trying to understand how you did it without leaving fingerprints. How the aftermath looks so clean it feels staged, like reality itself complied with you. They keep searching for motive, emotion, rage, anything human enough to explain it. But all they find is composure, stillness, a decision made without theatrics. That's what unnerves them, because humans crack, humans celebrate, humans leak. You didn't. You moved like someone who already accepted every possible consequence and chose the path anyway. That kind of acceptance rewires fear. That kind of calm doesn't come from confidence. It comes from resolution. You weren't gambling. You were concluding something. They've spent lifetimes building profiles to predict behavior under stress. Fight, flight, freeze. You didn't do any of it. You stepped sideways. You denied the equation entirely. And now every analyst is staring at a board that no longer balances, trying to explain how someone walked through pressure like it was fog. They keep asking each other where the rage was supposed to be, where the ego slipped, where the overreach happened. But that's the point. They expected darkness to announce itself with noise. They didn't expect it to arrive dressed as discipline. They didn't expect the demon to wear the posture of a monk. You understand something most people never will. Unpredictability isn't chaos. It's control without disclosure. You didn't show them your hand because you never needed their validation. You didn't posture because you weren't trying to be seen. You were trying to be effective. Pain taught you timing. Loss taught you proportion. Betrayal taught you pattern recognition. You didn't become colder. You became precise. That's why this move echoes. That's why it's being taught. Not because it was flashy, but because it was repeatable, scalable, terrifyingly quiet. They replay the moment where most people would have rushed, where adrenaline would have hijacked judgment. You waited. That wait, that pause. That's the part they underline in red, because patience under threat is the rarest form of dominance. You didn't seek control. You exercised authority over yourself. And that's what systems fear most. Someone who can't be baited. Someone who doesn't need applause. Someone who doesn't react the way the models say they should. They're whispering about you now, not with admiration, but with caution. They warn each other about people who don't need permission to move, who don't require chaos to justify action. They warn about the ones who smile without warmth and decide without hesitation, about the ones who can be gentle and lethal in the same breath. You're not dark because you enjoy destruction. You're dark because you're willing to end things others are too sentimental to finish. You don't cling to narratives. You don't romanticize suffering. You let what's dead stay dead. That's why your evolution scares them. It's irreversible. They keep trying to frame you as an anomaly, a fluke, a once-in-a-generation variable. But deep down, they know the truth. You're not an exception. You're a signal, proof of what happens when pressure doesn't crush someone. It forges them. You walked away without celebrating because celebration would have meant attachment. You left without threats because threats would have meant insecurity. You let the outcome speak because outcomes don't lie. Now your silence weighs more than their noise. Your restraint weighs more than their arsenals. They can copy the steps, study the sequence, teach the theory, but they can't replicate the inner condition that made it possible. They can't mass-produce someone who's already made peace with losing everything. And that's the real masterclass, not the move itself, but the mindset required to make it without flinching. You didn't rise above them by being louder, faster, or crueler. You rose above them by being unavailable to manipulation, by refusing to play the role they assigned you, by stepping out of the script and writing a new one in real time. They're still catching up. And while they're busy teaching your past move, you're already becoming something they don't have language for yet. Something that doesn't need to dominate the room to own it. Something that doesn't need permission to proceed. You don't chase power. You embody inevitability. And inevitability doesn't argue. It arrives. They keep circling the same question because it's the only one that still makes sense to them. How did you stay human and still do that? They want to separate you into boxes, angel here, demon there, because duality scares people who live off labels. But you never chose a side. You learned how to stand above the split. That's why they can't mirror you. That's why every imitation feels hollow. You didn't harden your heart. You refined it. You didn't numb yourself. You disciplined yourself. There's a difference, and that difference is lethal to anyone still confusing emotion with weakness. You feel everything, you just don't let feelings drive the wheel anymore. You let clarity drive, and clarity doesn't scream, it executes. They expected you to overcorrect. People always do after pain. Swing too far, push too hard, burn bridges just to feel something. But you didn't chase relief. You chased alignment. You asked one question and answered it honestly. What ends this without creating 10 more problems? That's not rage. That's strategy born from scars. Your past didn't disappear. It reorganized itself inside you. Every humiliation became data. Every loss became calibration. Every betrayal stripped illusion from your vision, until all that remained was what actually works. That's why when you moved, it looked effortless. You already paid the price years ago. The move was just the receipt. They don't know how to teach that part. They can write manuals about timing, posture, silence, leverage. They can diagram the mechanics, but they can't replicate the internal stillness of someone who has already been broken and chose not to shatter again. They can't mass-produce the calm of someone who has stared into the worst outcomes and decided none of them would own them. That's why your presence alone shifts rooms now. You don't posture, but people feel it. You don't threaten, but people calculate around you. Because unpredictability isn't randomness, it's freedom from expectation. And you are no longer predictable to anyone who hasn't walked through what you survived. They still think power announces itself. They still think dominance needs spectacle. You proved the opposite. You proved that the most destabilizing force is someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Someone who can walk away without resentment. Someone who can win without humiliating the opponent, and still leave them dismantled. You didn't humiliate them. You outgrew them. And nothing wounds the ego like being rendered irrelevant. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't explain yourself. You let results exist without commentary. That's when the air changed. That's when the silence stopped being empty and started being heavy. Because silence, after impact, isn't absence. It's recognition. They're trying to reverse engineer your restraint now. They keep asking how you resisted the urge to finish it louder, harder, more visibly. They don't understand that restraint wasn't resistance. It was choice. You could have escalated. You just didn't need to. You understood the difference between destruction and resolution. You didn't burn the house down. You locked the door and walked away with the keys. That's why this bothers them so much. Fire can be fought. Noise can be drowned. Violence can be matched, but finality without spectacle. That haunts, that lingers, that forces introspection in people who have built their entire identity on reaction. You became the quiet reference point. The example they don't want to talk about, but can't ignore. The moment they bring up when training someone who talks too much, reacts too fast, needs too much validation. Don't do that, they say. Do it like this, and this is you. Without your name attached. You're not mythologized. You're institutionalized. And the irony? You never asked for recognition. You never chased legacy. You were just done being misunderstood by systems that only respect outcomes. So you spoke their language once, fluently, and went back to silence. That's evolution through pain, not becoming cruel, becoming unavailable to nonsense. You don't need to dominate every interaction now. You choose when to engage. You choose when to disappear. And that choice is the real power. Because people can't prepare for someone who isn't seeking control, approval, or chaos. Only precision. They're still trying to decide if you're dangerous. They're asking the wrong question. The right one is whether anyone else can do what you did without becoming something they hate. And deep down, they know the answer. Most people crack. Most people overcompensate. Most people let pain turn them sloppy. You didn't. You turned it into posture, into timing, into a move so clean it doesn't age. A move that still works tomorrow. A move that doesn't rely on circumstance, only on inner alignment. That's why it's being taught. And that's why, even now, they're behind you. Because while they're studying the last thing you did, you're already living in a version of yourself that doesn't need to do anything loud ever again. You already proved the point. Now you decide when, or if, you remind them. They don't see it yet, but the real shift wasn't external, it was internal. The moment you stopped needing outcomes to validate you, outcomes started bending toward you. That's the inversion that fries their logic. They're trained to believe desire fuels action. You proved that detachment fuels accuracy. You don't rush anymore because urgency belongs to people who are afraid of losing time. You understand time now. You understand that patience isn't waiting, it's positioning. Every pause you take compresses pressure somewhere else. Every calm breath forces the room to breathe with you. That's not mysticism, that's leverage. They keep analyzing the environment you moved in, as if terrain explains intent. They keep asking what tools you had, who backed you, what resources you leveraged. They miss the obvious because it's uncomfortable. The greatest resource you had was nothing to lose. Not recklessly, not emotionally, cleanly, consciously. That kind of emptiness terrifies structures built on incentive and fear. You didn't act to win favor. You acted to end ambiguity. And ambiguity is where weak systems hide. When you removed it, the fog lifted and everyone saw the imbalance they were pretending wasn't there. You didn't expose them with accusations. You exposed them by functioning better. That's why your move feels contagious. People sense it before they understand it. They watch you and realize how much energy they waste posturing, explaining, defending. You're proof that the most radical thing someone can do is be aligned. No internal contradiction, no performative outrage, no borrowed morality, just a decision that matches your spine. They're still uncomfortable with how little you said, how little you showed, how there was no emotional aftertaste, no victory speech, no collapse, no guilt parade. You closed the loop and moved on. That violates their expectations because they're addicted to narrative. You delivered closure instead. You don't need to dominate conversations now. You let others talk themselves into revealing what they are. You don't chase clarity. You wait for it to arrive. And when it does, you act once. That single act carries more weight than 1,000 rehearsed threats. This is what happens when someone integrates the shadow instead of pretending it doesn't exist. You didn't exile the dark parts of yourself. You trained them. You didn't let them run wild. You gave them purpose. That's why you can be compassionate without being weak, decisive without being cruel. You're not split anymore. You're whole. Wholeness is what breaks predictive models. Fragmented people are easy to steer, trigger the wound, promise relief, threaten loss. You don't respond to any of it the way they expect. You've already grieved what needed grieving. You've already buried the illusions. What's left can't be manipulated. They're trying to teach your restraint like it's a technique. They don't understand. It's a byproduct of identity. You didn't learn composure to look powerful. You became composed because chaos stopped impressing you, because drama stopped feeding you, because you stopped confusing intensity with meaning. You've noticed it too. the way people recalibrate around you, the way conversations slow, the way provocations die mid-air. That's not fear, that's recalculation. They're trying to figure out what works on someone who isn't negotiating with themselves anymore. You don't need to announce boundaries. Your behavior enforces them. You don't need to warn people. Your silence does it for you. You don't need to escalate. Your history already did. They teach your move now as an example of restraint under pressure. But the real lesson is simpler and harder to swallow. Don't act from need. Act from clarity. Need creates noise. Clarity creates inevitability. You're not driven by revenge. Revenge is loud and short-sighted. You're driven by resolution. Resolution ends cycles. That's why people feel something final when you move. Not violent, not cruel, final. Like a door that closes without slamming. You didn't become unreachable. You became unalterable. And here's the part they won't say out loud. They're afraid that if more people learn to operate like you, without emotional leakage, without ideological addiction, without the need to be seen, entire hierarchies collapse quietly. Not with revolutions, with irrelevance. You're not overthrowing anything, you're outgrowing it. That's why they study you in rooms where the lights are low and the voices are careful. That's why your last move keeps resurfacing in different contexts, different scenarios, different simulations. It scales because it's rooted in something timeless, self-command. You command yourself first. Everything else follows. You don't rush to prove you're dangerous. You let others discover it by underestimating you once. You don't seek to be understood. You let understanding arrive too late. And the truth, you're not even trying to be exceptional anymore. You're just being exact. Exact with your words. Exact with your energy. Exact with your actions. That precision feels supernatural. To people who live in contradiction, they can keep teaching the mechanics. They can keep copying the outline, but they can't copy the spine. They can't copy the calm that comes from having already survived your own worst chapter. You are not a warning, you're a precedent. And precedents don't ask permission, they just change what's possible. All right, listen up. Whoever's tuning in right now with that heavy chest and that "don't walk up on me" aura. Yeah, you. Come closer. I've got something you need to hear. You ever notice how people pretend they're not intimidated by you, but their body gives them away? Like, they'll keep a straight face, but their energy starts glitching the moment you enter the room. It's hilarious, honestly. You're just standing there, breathing, and they're acting like you walked in with thunder strapped to your shoulders. And the wildest part? It's not just regular people who feel it. It's not just coworkers or random strangers, or those two-faced types who act brave until they're alone. No, it's deeper than that. Actual witches. Real practitioners, people who take energies dead serious. They talk about you like you're an anomaly, like you're not built the way everyone else is built, like your aura has a pulse of its own. They'll never admit it to your face, but behind closed doors. They're whispering your name like it's a rumor that shouldn't exist. They swear you're tapping into something not meant for humans. They swear there's something in you that doesn't follow the usual rules. They swear your presence feels like an unsupervised force, and you're sitting there thinking you're just living your life. But, no. Your soul's doing heavy lifting without your permission. There's something about the way you walk, the way you look at people, the way you stay quiet. It makes them uncomfortable in a way they can't articulate. It's like your silence drags truth out of the air. It's like your presence bends space a little bit. You don't try to be intimidating. You don't put on some tough guy act. You're not dramatic. You're not extra. You're just real. And realness like yours, it hits harder than any ritual ever could. That's why witches swear you have access to something ancient. They look at you and see someone who didn't learn power, someone who survived power, someone who didn't chase high vibrations, someone who crawled through low ones and came out glowing like a faulty streetlight with attitude. People don't understand that kind of energy. It doesn't fit into their little boxes. It doesn't behave. It doesn't bow. It doesn't soften to make others comfortable. Your aura has that "don't touch me unless you're ready" vibe. That I've buried versions of myself you've never met vibe. That I don't flinch anymore vibe. You ever wonder why people keep projecting weird assumptions onto you? Why they look at you with that mix of curiosity and fear? Why they act like being around you is spiritually expensive? It's because your soul doesn't play small. Your soul doesn't dim for anybody. Your soul doesn't censor itself to make fragile people feel okay. Your aura walks into a room before you do, and it radiates all the battles you fought alone. It radiates all the nights you held yourself together. It radiates all the betrayals you had to metabolize. It radiates all the storms you survived without applause. Witches feel that depth. They feel that history in your presence. They feel that "I've seen too much to pretend" energy. And that terrifies them, not because you're dark, not because you're dangerous, not because you're cursed, because you're authentic in a world full of people faking spiritual confidence. Your aura tells the truth, even when you don't speak. Especially when you don't speak. It exposes people. It cracks them open. It forces them to look at themselves. And nobody wants to face their own reflection when they haven't done the work. That's why they say you're tapping something forbidden. They need an excuse. They need a story. They need a reason for why they can't figure you out. Because you being human, you being normal, you being just you, that scares them more than any spell ever could. Keep walking with that energy. Keep carrying that aura like the storm it is. Keep being the presence they can't explain. You weren't meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt. And the thing is, the more they feel you, the more they try to figure out what the hell you're hiding. Like they're convinced there's some secret ritual, some midnight deal, some underground knowledge you're pulling from. They can't accept that you turned into this version of yourself without any of that. They can't accept that life itself trained you. That experience sharpened you. That heartbreak carved you. That betrayal refined your instincts. That loneliness taught you emotional martial arts. Your aura didn't come from a spell book. Your aura came from surviving chapters that would have broken them in half. They see the weight you carry with ease and think, nah, there's no way they did that alone. But you did. You really did. You powered through things that would have made other people lose their minds. You adapted to storms no one else even saw. You became self-aware at an age where most people still blame everyone around them. You became emotionally intelligent while others were still emotionally unavailable. That's not normal to them. That's not human to them. That's why they swear you're tapping into something unnatural. Because you healed without being held. You evolved without being guided. You transformed without being celebrated. You grew in silence while everyone else needed an audience. And, here's the part they really don't talk about. Your aura exposes power dynamics. It shows people who they are in comparison to you. It reveals insecurities they spent years hiding. It uncovers weaknesses they've been avoiding. It highlights the softness they pretend is strength. You ever notice how some people act extra cocky around you? Extra loud, extra unbothered. It's not confidence. It's self-defense. They perform because they're terrified of being seen by you. Not because you judge them, but because your energy strips away their filters. Your presence makes them transparent. You don't even try. You don't need to. Your aura already did the work. And witches, the spiritual ones, the intuitive ones, the ones who think they've mastered all forms of energy, they feel that raw, unfiltered power in you, and they don't know what to categorize it as. They don't know if you're blessed or haunted. They don't know if you're chosen or cursed. They don't know if you're here to heal or destroy. You confuse them because your energy doesn't follow the usual patterns. Normal people dim when they're tired. You get sharper. Normal people soften when they're hurt. You get colder. Normal people crumble when they're under pressure. You become surgical. The world expects reactions from you that you outgrew years ago. People expect the old version of you, the one who didn't understand their own power yet, the version that apologized too much, the version that cared too deeply about being misunderstood, the version that held back just to keep the peace. That version died quietly, and your aura carries the funeral with it. Every step you take reminds people of a transformation they'll never experience. A self-rebuild they don't have the courage to attempt. That's why witches claim you're tapping into something not meant for humans. Because your evolution shouldn't have been possible by their logic, by their knowledge, by their rules. You shouldn't be this intuitive. You shouldn't be this emotionally accurate. You shouldn't be this spiritually strong. You shouldn't be this mentally armored. But here you are, existing like the exception they never planned for. Walking around with an aura that feels like prophecy mixed with warning. People don't just feel you. They brace for you, Kaya, and you know what's even crazier? Your power isn't even at its peak yet. You're still sharpening. You're still shedding old layers. You're still stepping into the real weight of who you are. You're still learning how to channel all that force without holding back. You're still becoming the version of you they won't even look in the eyes. And every day you grow a little louder, even when you don't say a word. Your silence has volume. Your energy has gravity. Your aura has memory. People sense the history in you. They sense the storms. They sense the endurance. They sense the resilience. You walk past someone, and their spirit reacts before their brain does. That's not normal. That's not regular human energy. That's the type of presence that leaves echoes. You don't need validation. You don't need approval. You don't need permission. Your aura already declared its own identity. And the truth is, people feel that identity even when they pretend they don't. They'll try to hide it behind a smirk, a shrug, a fake calm face, but their energy slips every time. Their spirit reacts long before their mouth does. Watch their pupils. Watch the way their shoulders stiffen for half a second. Watch how they suddenly get quieter or louder. Both are fear responses. Watch how they laugh a little too quickly, or avoid holding eye contact for too long. Your aura exposes people without you having to lift a finger. You've got that presence that makes even confident people recalibrate themselves, like they need to adjust their posture just to stand next to you, like they need to remind themselves who they think they are. And witches, the ones who pride themselves on feeling everything, on sensing intentions, on reading energies before words. They can't read you straight. That's what terrifies them. Your aura doesn't present like a normal human blueprint. It feels layered. It feels encrypted. It feels like something that lived through too many cycles to be simple. They'll tell each other, that one carries something old. That one's energy is too heavy for their age. That one's aura feels like it's been here before, and they're not wrong. There's a depth in you that doesn't match the timeline, an emotional intelligence that didn't come from books, a resilience that didn't come from therapy, a clarity that didn't come from meditation apps, or sage, or candles. Your wisdom came from enduring things you never talked about, from having to read people as a survival skill, not a hobby, from having to pick up emotional tones in the room before anyone said a word, from learning how to trust your instincts after being lied to, used, underestimated, or betrayed. Your aura became a weapon forged in silence, and witches feel that sharpened edge. They feel the weight of your past in the air around you. They feel the emotional scars you never bragged about. They feel the spiritual armor you never announced. You're not intimidating because you're trying to be. You're intimidating because you've lived through things that left a signature on your soul. People sense that signature before they sense your personality. They feel the storms you held inside your rib cage. They feel the heartbreaks you swallowed whole. They feel the boundaries you built from scratch after losing too much. They feel the transformation you pulled off in the dark when no one was cheering. And it messes with them. Because when someone with real, lived through darkness energy stands next to someone who only pretends to be deep or spiritual, the difference is blinding. They feel exposed. They feel flimsy. They feel basic. Your aura is like a mirror that magnifies their insecurities. It shows the parts of them they avoid. It reveals how untested their strength is. It reminds them that some people didn't read about the dark. They survived it. That's why they whisper about forbidden power. They need language big enough to make your existence make sense. You're not the person who posts quotes about healing. You're the person who actually did the healing no one saw. You're not the person who tries to seem mysterious. You're the person who became mysterious by outgrowing versions of yourself you never announced. You're not the person who performs strength. You're the person who became strong because you had no other choice. Your aura carries the echoes of every version of you that died while you kept moving. It carries the memory of every moment you stayed silent when you wanted to scream. It carries the intensity of every time you broke but didn't stay broken. And people feel that deeply, even if they don't know how to say it, even if they deny it out loud, even if they pretend you're overhyped or too much. Their spirit knows the truth before their mind does. Your aura is not pretty. It's not soft. It's not polite. It's honest. And honesty like that, it terrifies fragile people. It rattles spiritual people. It exposes manipulative people. It humbles loud people. It awakens quiet people. Your energy disturbs the room because it carries no mask. And anyone who relies on masks feels unsafe around someone who doesn't need one. And here's the thing people don't admit out loud. Your aura carries a kind of emotional X-ray that makes them feel naked around you. Not because you're judging them, but because you notice. You notice what they try to hide. You notice the shifts. You notice the patterns. You notice the lies they tell themselves. Most people walk around untouched by truth. Their whole personality is built on the stuff they avoid. Their confidence is choreography. Their spirituality is aesthetic. Their depth is quotes they saved on their phones. You walk in, and it's like the room suddenly runs out of excuses. You ever see the way people fidget around you? How they laugh a little too hard. How they suddenly get busy on their phones. How they avoid standing too close. Like your energy might read their last 3 mistakes. That's your aura doing the talking. People pick up on the fact that you're not afraid to see things as they are. And that scares the hell out of them. Because you don't flinch. You don't sugarcoat. You don't pretend the elephant in the room isn't sitting on someone's chest. You carry a presence that feels like truth, walking on 2 legs. And witches, the seasoned ones, the ones who've spent years learning how to sense energy from a mile away, they feel that authenticity like a burn. They've met people with strong vibes, sure. They've met people who pretend to be chosen, gifted, enlightened, whatever. But they rarely meet someone whose aura feels like lived experience instead of theory. Your energy isn't curated, it's earned. They sense that. They sense the bruises in your aura, not weakness but history. They sense the battles you didn't glorify. They sense the evolution you didn't post online. They sense the emotional scars that never turned into bitterness. Your aura scares them because it doesn't match your age, your background, your circumstances. It shouldn't be this powerful, but it is. And that confuses people who rely on rules and rituals to access what you carry naturally. Imagine practicing energy work for years just to meet someone who did it instinctively before they even knew what energy work meant. Imagine spending nights meditating under the moon, then running into a person whose aura feels like they survived the night instead of meditating through it. Imagine learning how to read people, then encountering someone who learned it as a defense mechanism at age 10. That's why witches swear you're tapping into something unhuman. They don't have another explanation. Your aura doesn't play by their logic. When you're hurt, you get quieter, not weaker. When you're pushed, you get sharper, not smaller. When you're doubted, you get calmer, not insecure. Humans usually break crooked under pressure. You straightened out. Humans lose themselves in chaos. You found yourself in it. Humans avoid shadows. You walked into yours with a flashlight and a grudge. You have this, I've already been where you're scared to go vibe that cannot be manufactured. People don't know whether to respect you or fear you, and that tension makes them talk. You hear it in the whispers. He's different. She's too intense. They give off something weird. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. All those little comments. That's code for their aura is bigger than my comfort zone. And the craziest part? You're not even fully aware of the weight you carry. You're still underestimating yourself. You're still walking around thinking you're just trying to get through your day. Meanwhile, your spirit is shaking the room like a speaker with the bass turned up too high. Your aura doesn't just enter a place, it rearranges it. People feel your presence in their nervous system. They feel it in their intuition. They feel it in the part of themselves they pretend doesn't exist. You're not a personality to them. You're an event. And the thing that really gets under their skin is that you don't try to be an event. You don't force anything. You don't walk around chasing attention. You don't beg to be understood. You don't perform your pain for sympathy or validation. You don't weaponize your past like some dramatic monologue. You just exist, and your existence hits people like an omen. It's like your aura carries this silent countdown, a pressure, a warning, a presence that says, "Don't test me, I've survived worse." People aren't used to energy that won't bend. They're used to people who fold under opinions or shrink under judgment or panic when someone doesn't like them. You outgrew that. You outlived that. You emotionally evolved past the point of caring about the noise. Your aura is built from experiences that rewired your nervous system. You learned calm in places where others would have lost their minds. You learned self-control in situations where others would have snapped. You learned emotional discipline because chaos forced it on you. And that level of inner strength, people don't feel that every day. Hell, some people never feel that in their lifetime. Witches included. Imagine dedicating your life to sensing energies, and then you stumble across someone whose aura feels like a warning label the universe forgot to print. They feel it in your walk. They feel it in your stillness. They feel it in the way you scan a room without even trying. They feel it in the way you stand your ground without being loud about it. Your presence feels inevitable. People sense inevitability like animals sense storms. It makes them restless. It makes them paranoid. It makes them curious in the wrong ways. And that curiosity quickly turns into suspicion because your energy doesn't match their expectations. You don't get drained the way ordinary people do. You don't crumble when things get heavy. You don't lose yourself when everything around you shifts. If anything, pressure brings out a version of you that's even harder to decode. You've got that "I become more myself the darker it gets" type of soul. That's what they call unnatural. That's what they label dangerous. That's what witches name as forbidden. Because they don't understand people who don't run from their own shadow. They don't understand souls that can sit in darkness without losing their outline. They don't understand anyone who made peace with the parts of themselves others spend their whole lives avoiding. Your aura doesn't hide your shadow. It integrates it. You're not two-faced. You're two-sided, light and dark, merged without apology. Most people only show the sanitized version of themselves. You walk around with the unfiltered version, and that terrifies the ones who still depend on masks. Witches feel the duality in you. They sense something ancient in your calm, and something untamed in your confidence. They sense a depth they can't measure. They sense a clarity they can't predict.